to the Marketing Minutes, episode 4, with Rigas Harbilas and Agafonoff from the Practice Insights. To begin with, we're going to be talking about pricing in supermarkets, the culture of specials and discounts. What is the real price of a product when 80% of the product is often sold on discounts? What is the real price of a Tim Tam, for example? So we're going to be looking at pricing in a retail context. The other aspect of reality we're going to look at is also in terms of aesthetics and representation in things like advertising. We've got the phenomenon, the very recent phenomenon of Kanye West spending $7 million to advertise on the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl traditionally is about the biggest budget advertising that you can possibly do. They spend millions, often tens of millions of dollars to produce these ads, and they're meant to be big budget, big impact, high production values for that particular audience, because it only comes around once a year and all the eyeballs are on it. However, in this instance, Kanye produced a very short ad filmed on his mobile phone, just urging people to go to his website to buy his stuff. It was very simple, very basic, and he managed to convert that into $19 million in sales in 24 hours. So what is it about representation and advertising and real versus fake in that arena? And then the final area of real versus fake that we're going to discuss is research, real versus fake research. When we're talking about research today, for example, we have a lot of artificial intelligence tools at our disposal. To a degree, we can get artificial intelligence to probe research participants online, for instance, and effectively fulfill the role of a qualitative researcher to a degree. Is this the same as an actual person conducting research? So to begin with, Rigas, please set us up with a discussion around the culture of specials and discounts in supermarkets. What is the real price of a product when 80% of the product is sold on discount?
Yeah, that's right. Look, just to put some context and maybe some real data behind what we're saying here, and we've worked for a very long time, both you and I, on packaged goods with very large packaged goods brands and clients, and every time we hear from them that their product, let's pick a number. I'm going to say, you said 80%. I'm going to say, let's be safe, about 70%. Let's say 3/4 of the volume of the product is sold with a ticket, with a specials ticket. It could be half price, it could be something off. I don't know the exact numbers about when and where. I think the deeper the discount, the bigger the ratio of volume that it attracts, right? Obviously. So it's really sold. The vast majority is sold at discount, and maybe even half of it is sold at deep half price discount. And I'm not sure of those numbers, but it's roughly, I reckon it's roughly there, which begs the question. And I shop, you shop, we shop frequently, right? So, and I find that if something is not on special, if not a single cup noodle is on special and they're all $2.50 instead of $1.20, I don't buy any of them. I get something else, you know what I mean? Something else that's going to fulfill that whatever desire that's going to be. So, and then I started thinking, well, hold on, what is the function of recommended retail price in a supermarket today? This is not across the board, of course, but what is the function of recommended retail price in a supermarket today? The vast majority of the product is sold on discount. And I started thinking about this reality versus fake. And of course, here's the question, Nick, is recommended retail price now fake price? And when I say fake price, why is it fake? It's fake because they need the psychology of the discount to sell it, right? They need the psychology of the discount to sell it. So if you don't have a fake price on it, you can't tell me that the Tim Tam is on special. Partly an answer into your initial question, which is, why don't we just find a halfway point between the deep discount and the recommended retail price and say, right, Tim Tams are $2.20, whatever the case may be, and that's it, right? That's it. Unless there's inflation or whatever, they're $2.20, end of story. what happens in that scenario? And I think what happens in that scenario is something very different to what happens in a scenario where you have recommended retail price, which is now obviously fake price. So in order to constantly play to my psychology that I'm getting a discount, I'm getting a discount. And my question is now, are we really getting a discount, or are we being sold a Fugazi by the supermarkets with recommended retail price? And if sorry, and are there legal implications to this? Is it a fake price? At what point does, let's say, the ACCC or whoever say, hold on, this is really not the price of this good, the fake price?
I'm the main grocery buyer for our house. I'm the cook. I get all of the domestic stuff sorted, and I enjoy shopping. I'm one of these people that enjoys rolling down each of the aisles in the supermarket and buying stuff. And I can tell you, as the main grocery buyer, the only thing that I am looking for is on special. And when I'm with my children, the pester power of children, I've even taught them that they can only choose things that are on special, that have got a yellow tag, that are 50% off. 30% off kind of feels like the medium price. If something's 30% off, I can tolerate that. That's okay. Right. 50% off or 2 for 1. Now that feels like maybe I'm getting a little bit of value there. In the meat section, you'll often find that there's tags on fish and meat where they're near their use-by date and they drop dramatically, and they'll stick an individual price, and it's like I'm always looking for these things because it's almost like a game. It's like there's something inside of me as a shopper that just goes, I cannot let this big retailer take more money out of my bank account.
That's right.
Because, it's sort of like when you get to the end of a shop for a family of 4, a dog and a cat and a few chickens and a guinea pig, then you're looking at a difference where if it's 30% higher or 50% higher than the actual amount, you are talking hundreds of dollars. Hundreds of dollars. Yeah. So my weekly shop would be $350 to $400. Yeah. And that is me shopping like a hawk. Like a hawk.
Is the high price, which we're saying is kind of like the fake price. Then you're saying 30% off is the medium price and 50% off is the low price. So we've basically got a three-tiered pricing system happening in the supermarket for every product, a low, a medium, and a high. And you're right, it's like a game, and especially if you're not completely brand loyal, where you're happy to buy 3 or 4 different types of products or brands in a category, depending if they're on special, right? It is a game. Here's the thing, Nick, this keeps you engaged as a shopper, right?
I have to keep conscious as a shopper. I have to keep looking. I have to keep hunting. I have to keep gathering. So I'm not going through and just unconsciously picking stuff. It does keep me engaged, and it means that, I'm considering if there's a new product on the shelf, for instance, if they've got a new brand or a new product on the shelf and it's on special, I'll look at it and I'll consider it and I'll try it as well. I'll try it because it's on special. So maybe if that specials culture didn't exist, I'd be less able to be disrupted in terms of my decision-making and my consideration.
It is the psychological effect that is created by the different levels of specials that keep you, you're right, engaged as a shopper, perusing the shelves, which actually I know often, the companies we work for don't want perusal. They just want brand loyalty for their brand. They don't want anyone to look at other brands. They just want their brand to be bought. They want that. The supermarket doesn't want that. Supermarket wants perusal. It wants all brands kept in check in their place as subordinate to the supermarket hierarchy, basically. And they do that by keeping you engaged as a shopper, and bringing all the manufacturers to the table in terms of the special, the specialing psychology. So keeps you engaged, keeps you perusing. And I'm going to add one. I reckon it makes you buy more. Imagine a scenario where they hit this midpoint and there's no such thing as a special or a yellow ticket anymore on any item in the supermarket. They are fixed for the time being, right? It's almost like a psychologically dead experience. And I reckon you'll buy less. You'll buy one packet of Tim Tams. You'll buy one of this. You'll buy one of those. You won't be buying two, and etc. And to your point, new brands and products you might not even look at them in a way. I don't know.
There's no way in the world I would have bought 3 containers of Murray Street ice cream the other day unless it was 50% off, right? I have one more thing to say, which is also as the shopper, as the main shopper, the main grocery buyer in my family, it is a role that I've adopted. It's a social role, it's a functional role, it's also an emotional role, right? And I take it seriously. It's something that I want to be good at, that I do well. So when I get to the end of the shop and I do the basic maths in my head and work out, well, I've saved $150 or I've saved $200 on the shop. When I do that math, I give myself a big pat on the back, and there's a part of me that just feels good. It feels good about that because, it's not just about me as well. Like I'm providing a benefit for my whole family. So there's that other that residual psychological reinforcement of being a good person, providing a benefit to other people as well as to yourself, that you've done a good job. I've done a good job today by buying all the specials. So it feeds into that as well.
And here's the particular marketing genius behind all of this, Nick. If we just put it all together now, the culture of specials and what we call fake price, which is the recommended retail price, that culture of specials is now enabling the supermarkets to charge you $400, right, for basically, a trolley of overpriced groceries, right? $400 for that trolley of groceries, but have you feeling like you've saved money. They're taking $400 for all that crap in your trolley, right? Yet you feel like you've saved money. Now, you've got to admit that's genius.
That's the game we're in.
That's right.
The phenomenon of shrinkflation. Since inflation became a lot higher, retailers and brands have had to come up with various different strategies for getting people to continue to buy some of the products that they love. And one of the deceptions or adaptations that they've come up with is this idea of shrinkflation. So that Mars bar or Snickers bar that used to be this big is now this big, but it's still being sold for the same price. And I have to say, I am one of those lovers of a decent sized chocolate bar. Well, at the end of a long day of conducting market research, and maybe I've missed lunch, that I love to go to the supermarket and buy myself a big bar of Snickers or a big Mars bar. And just the palpable disappointment these days when I get my $1.50, 50% off Mars bar and I open it up. And it's now, Rigas, it's now the size, it's barely bigger than a Milky Way. It is this tiny little finger, this vague memory of what a Mars bar used to be, and it barely hits the spot at all. It's more like a taste sampler, if you like. And I've noticed it in other categories as well. Things like laundry detergent. A lot of those have lost 100 mils, and like this and that. There seems to be quite a number of products on the shelves at the supermarket that have undergone this shrinkflation phenomenon, and they're selling off the memory of the past product, of what it used to be like, the memory of the satiation and abundance that they provided in the past. But they're not delivering in reality. And yet, as the consumer, rationally knowing this, I am still stumping up and buying these miserable, tiny little chocolate bars. Why is that, Regas?
Well, you said it. You grew up with a memory of it. So you've got what we call an emotional craving for the product, probably because you started eating Mars bars when you were very young, and they are an exceptional product. Okay, let's just get that out of the way for a second. We're not poo-pooing Mars bars. Mars bar is, one of the most exceptional chocolate bars ever invented in modern history, right? I mean, its sales alone speak volumes, right? And the fact that you're still buying it is because the product itself is smaller. Yes, it's like it comes out of the favourites box now. That's true, but it's actually still a Mars bar, right? In its sort of fundamental taste profile. Now, your hankering, Nick, is emotional, right? Right. My hankering, our hankerings are emotional hankerings. So, no, it doesn't fill your gut like it used to. And your gut's probably bigger than it was. Let's not forget that. Remember all the work we did for Macca's? People would insist that, this is not saying anything out of school, Nick. People would insist that the Big Mac had shrunk.
It has shrunk,
consumers would.
It has shrunk. I'm sure it has.
According to McDonald's, it has not.
When I was a kid, I only needed to eat one. Now I need to eat 3.
According to McDonald's, it has not shrunk. But definitely the Mars bar has become shorter, and like us, and the Snickers bar as well. The Snickers bar has also, which is supposed to be the gut-filled product, not got the nuts, and of course, remember the classic ads, the Snickers classic ads. You're not yourself when you're hangry, and you become Mr. T or you become Joe Pesci in Casino or something. You know what I mean? So it's kind of brilliant ads.
That's what
brilliant, right? Brilliant, fantastic ads. Really, really great insight and brilliantly executed. Celebrity. It all came together. Fantastic stuff.
Is there a risk here? Is there a risk here with shrinkflation, with the phenomenon?
No, because you're still buying it because you're still consuming the memory. You're consuming. Sorry, what I was getting at before is you're consuming the memory of the product, and that emotional craving can be satisfied by a smaller product. But plus, they don't want to charge you $4 for a Mars bar.
What it actually reminds me of, Regas? Placebo effect. That it's effectively a placebo.
Yeah, kind of. And I would argue from a, let's call it a so-called bullshit health perspective, I would argue that you're filling your emotional craving, right, which is the main thing that you're filling, without putting as much sugar and chocolate into your body as you used to in order to do that. So it's a good thing. The iconic advertising for the Snickers bar was promising the satiating experience, right? Satiate your hunger. And of course, it doesn't really now. And the question is that, well, okay, I mean, is that I grew up with a Snickers bar thinking I'm going to eat it when I'm hungry, and you bought it and you ate it and you were still hungry. So does that impede your use of the product again? Does it lower the number of times you buy it per annum? This is the big deal with these products, annual penetration, right? Does it mean that you buy it once less per annum, which doesn't sound like a lot to people, but you and I both know the public buying a product once less per annum is massive in terms of market shares.
What it has done, just at a sensory level, and this is perhaps a little bit of a segue, but what it has done is that I've started to look for chocolate bars that have more texture and bite in them, right? So I've moved towards things like Chiquitos and, ones that have a bit more kind of nougat and
texture,
And what that means is it feels like I'm eating more, like I'm having to chew more, I'm having to eat more, it feels harder. And
that's interesting.
I'm gravitating to something that makes me feel like I'm going to be filled up a bit more.
Filled up more, yeah. Well, look, it's an interesting conundrum because, look, the thing is they could supply you with the original sized Snickers, but it probably would end up costing you, they'd have to charge $3, $4 or something. And it's like, it's a chocolate bar. People will not pay $4 for a chocolate bar.
Here's another hypothesis, Rigas. If they relaunched the original full-size Mars bar and Snickers, how would people react? Would they suddenly flock
Ooh.
to them, or would they go, "Oh my God, this is so gross and obscene now"?
It would have to be called nowadays. It would have to be called a jumbo or something, right? Like a Mars jumbo or something like that. You know, it would have to be. You couldn't say this is the original Mars and we've been ripping you off for like 20 years. They can't do that. They have to bring back the original one, right?
Yeah. I have the perfect example, Rigas, of where they have actually done this. So, as a child growing up, there was always the kid at school that had the wagon wheels in their lunchbox, right? Wagon wheels, they were these really big, round biscuits with marshmallow and a bit of raspberry jam or something, or strawberry jam in the middle, and they were big, and I was so jealous of them. And then, you know, so I've had kids, and then I thought, you know, I'm going to get my kids wagon wheels. And you go and buy wagon wheels, and they now come in a biscuit packet, and they're only like the size of a biscuit. It's a completely different experience. The other day at Aldi, I saw it in the special buys, a big box, original wagon wheels. Wait just there.
No
I'll get you them, and I'll show you them. So this is what I picked up at Aldi in the special buys section. Okay, wagon wheel original. And when I showed these to my kids, when they discovered them, okay, what happened? My son immediately took 3 of them and went hid underneath his doona and ate all 3 of them. My daughter then discovered he did that and then ransacked them. And then my wife found them and went, "Oh my God, I used to get these in my lunchbox," right? So it created an enormous craving for them, enormous craving.
Aldi strikes
Not
again.
wanting to miss out, fear of missing out, especially because it's also a limited edition. They might not get this again. But look at the size of that, Lucas. Look at the size.
Yeah. It's double the size.
I'm going to eat one right now.
Double. It's big. It's big. I know they're much. Yeah, that's what it used to be. Yeah.
This is incredible. It's completely different to the small biscuit.
We've got to stop now because this is now bordering on free marketing advice. What we're about to say next, we're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, but because what you've just indicated there is that this is a format issue. Wagon wheel can do this because currently wagon wheels are multi-pack in the, whereas they can launch these as a different. It doesn't matter that they say original because they're now selling them in a different format. So you can't compare a consumer can't compare current wagon wheels to original wagon wheels because it's a completely different format. So if you sold those as singles or just like you said in a multi-pack like that, it's a different format for wagon wheels.
I'm going to share with you Kanye West's $7 million advertisement that he advertised during the Super Bowl. Only $7 million, not from a production perspective. That's how much he paid for the slot. And as a result of this, he converted this into $19 million in sales in the next 24 hours.
Hey y'all, this is Gary, and this is my commercial. And since we spent all the money on the commercial spot, we actually didn't spend any money on the actual commercial. But the idea is I want you to go to Yeezy.com, YEEZY.com, and I'm gonna write it at the bottom of the screen, and I got some shoes, and that's it.
$7 million for the slot. That was his ad. $19 million in sales 24 hours later. This has created controversy as well because Kanye has come out and said many controversial things in the past. He's seen as anti-Semitic, etc. And a lot of people have said, wow, how did this guy manage to be able to advertise to such a massive audience on mainstream media? And the answer that we've been given is because he had the money to spend on it. In other words, you can just stump up $7 million to have your little slot on Super Bowl. And he converted that little piece of extremely low budget advertising to $19 million. It may be low budget in terms of the way that it was actually made in this situation, but it's an incredibly high value ad in terms of it relies on the Kanye West brand, does it not? Okay, it relies on Kanye's anti-establishment narrative. For this ad to be successful, it relies on everything that Kanye has done in the past in the media spotlight and continues to do, right? So it cannot be successful as a self-contained piece of media in and of itself. Okay, it is the tip of an iceberg of a massive investment of both money and time and celebrity and brand. So the construction that it is a cheap and low budget ad is absolutely a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding. It's actually an incredibly clever and expensive ad if you look at it within the broader context of the entire marketing strategy.
Kanye West already is a really, really, really big brand. So the ad that he made for the Super Bowl is almost irrelevant. It's the fact that he's already, and to your point, billions have been spent on making Kanye West into a big brand, right? And billions have been made, but, billions have been spent. So it is a big brand ad at the Super Bowl, just like the other big brand ads. And just because Ford, I'm making this up, right? Just because Ford spent $10 million on an ad for the Super Bowl, it doesn't mean that Ford is garnering value just from that $10 million ad. It's Ford. They've been around for 100 years. They've spent billions in advertising to get to that point. So you could argue that any Super Bowl ad is purely capitalizing, because it's all big brand stuff, and it's purely capitalizing on existing brand value. And that is the tip of the iceberg. So that's a good insight.
And look, the fact that it was filmed on his phone in the back of a car, all right, that's the aesthetic. That's the aesthetic. And if you think about Kanye, what is his brand? His brand is all about truth telling and keeping it real, right? And he says these controversial things, whether they're deeply offensive or culturally inappropriate. He says it, and so people believe they're getting the real deal from Kanye. They believe that they're getting the unedited narrative or script from Kanye, right? So the way that he delivered that advertisement was perfectly in line with the Kanye brand. And if he tried to make a high production value ad, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked.
Either way, it is still the tip of a very, very large iceberg.
As somebody that specializes in video ethnography is one of my tools. I've conducted a lot of training workshops in this area over the years, and I'll get students that come in and will want to produce a really high quality, high production values video from their research interviews, and they'll try and make this kind of, CNN-esque video, and then it falls flat with the audience. And I explain to them, well, there's a problem with your documentation and representation style, right? Like with ethnography, data and research, it needs to feel like you're kind of in the coalface. You don't want images and audio to be 100% perfect. If you can get a variety of different kind of representation textures in there, self-documentation with your own observational footage, then even better. And in fact, dirty footage that is, efficiently edited but not overproduced is actually much more persuasive in terms of presenting evidence and insight than something which is high production values and creates suspicion and concern that actually you're just trying to influence the audience. So this is just something that I wanted to share immediately, which is that in research, both in the way that we collect data and the way that we represent it, there is an audience. And that audience has certain expectations in terms of what looks like real data, what looks like real insight, versus what doesn't pass the sniff test. I want to switch the topic now to research and what is real research versus fake research versus, somewhere in between research.
If I could just take a few minutes just to talk about what you might call a very real research project done quite a long time ago. It's probably one of the most famous and infamous research projects ever conducted, I think, in history. I'm not an expert, but I believe it's got to be up there. That is the study of Alfred Kinsey on basically people's sexual habits in the United States. Now, just to give you an example, this guy was just to give you a bit of background, this guy was an entomologist, I believe. He was a biologist. He spent his life counting these things called gall wasps, etc. And look, long story short, he's a professor at a university. Long story short, he gets funding, applies for and gets funding by the Rockefeller Institute to conduct this extremely large-scale study of human sexual behavior. And he starts with, and this is published, he publishes a book in 1948 called The Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, right? It comes, and get this, okay? This is what I want to talk about, real research, right? Get this. This was done by a team of maybe 3 or 4 people, him and an assistant and someone else, I believe. And they interviewed, get this, hold on, I've got these numbers in front of me, 5,300 face-to-face interviews across the United States. Look, it was during the war years and after the war, it was only white males at the time. That's just the way society was in America at the time. It was a study of white males only. But nevertheless, it was 5,300 males that they studied face-to-face. And the way they would do this is they'd be trained, because think about this, they're collecting people's sexual histories, right? Think about this. You're asking people to tell you about their most intimate parts of their life in a way, in a face-to-face situation, right? So they had this special training program where people, were asked to, or were trained to ask questions in a particular way, right, to elicit trust. Lots and lots of qualitative interviewing techniques that we use. I'm not saying they started them, but we use them today, which is you come in and you put the person at ease. For example, you might even tell a little joke. You might, do something to create a little bit of rapport. And then you never judge what they say. Never, ever, ever judge what they say about anything at all, right? Especially in this. And they had then memorized a coding system. So they all had a sheet in front of them, and they had this coding system where they would put answers in this coding system, memorized. This is all memorized, because he said, if you've got books and papers in front of you, the interview just goes to crap, right? They're not going to trust you. It just looks like it's a fake interview. Right, so make it look, so they memorize it and they make these little notations, and all this would be fed into punch. Remember, you're too young. You don't remember punch cards, but punch cards into mainframes. 5,000. These interviews range, depending on the person's sexual history, from 15 minutes to 6 hours in some instances, and they would sit there meticulously noting everything, fed it all back into a computer system. It was both a qualitative and a quantitative project at the same time. It was indistinguishable in that respect, right? Although it wasn't a psychoanalytic interview where they're trying to figure out the psychology behind all sex and this and that and fetishes, not at all. It was just more of a kind of, and that's what they said, sexual behavior in the human male. And they published it. 5,300 interviews conducted primarily by 2 people, with another 1 or 2 helping out, and then a little team at the back doing the data and all that sort of stuff. Publishes this book in 1948, and it becomes a bestseller in the United States, right? The Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. The Rockefeller Institute makes squillions of dollars. Kinsey becomes humongously famous, giving lectures around the country in puritanical America about sexual behavior in the human male. He's able to do this because he himself is so dispassionate about the whole thing. It's like he's studying gall wasps, right? Sexual behavior. Anyway, the institute makes tons of money. Kinsey becomes really famous, world famous actually, at the time, as far as you could back then. And they give him even more money, and then he does this and then he proceeds to interview 6,000 American white women and publishes a book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. 5 years later, Nick, think about that. 5 years after that mammoth task of the first book, 5 years later only, conducts another 6,000 face-to-face interviews across the country, roughly with the same team, and produces an even more mammoth work, which is, and get this now, the politics, this book bombs. And Kinsey is just basically becomes a persona non grata. Apparently, in puritanical America, no one wanted to read about the sexual behavior of women, just about men or something like that. And there's all kinds of things happen. That's not the point. The point is that this is a mammoth qualitative and quantitative project. It is what you call at the coalface, asking people directly, face to face, getting this information. I don't think it's ever really been replicated in its scope or scale. Who could do that nowadays, right? And the question I have now, Nick, is sorry for that intro, but it is a very, very interesting project, that one, from a research point of view, and very nuanced in its insights and outcomes, right? Not black and white at all about people's sexual behaviour. It just shows all of the all of the nuances, and it's very fascinating stuff. Now, my question is today, with technology, how would we, let's say, Nick, you and I have done a lot of interviews and big projects and stuff. How would today one go about conducting a survey like this with all the tools that we have at our disposal, which is online, which is AI, which is, and does that mean if we start to use technology to collect this type of information now from maybe even more people than that in a much shorter space of time, right? Is that somehow, Nick, my question is that somehow fake? Is that interaction with consumers that we're getting we're using digital mechanisms to get information from them? Is that a more fake or less authentic or less, is the data worse?
Doing Zoom interviews and calls with people obviously means that we can cover anywhere in the world now. We can engage with a shopper in the US and in the UK, in India, whereas before we were physically constrained to our particular area where we live geographically. Maybe we'd be flying to a different state. Yes. And similarly, in terms of AI probing as part of surveys, so now you can get AI based upon what people are filling out in a survey to identify some keywords and then to probe further on particular things that come up. A little bit like a qualitative researcher themselves, or a lot like a qualitative researcher themselves.
Right.
And therefore get more long version answers, more detail, more description from people. And once again, that means effectively what that means is that you can ask qualitative questions to a quantitative sample, right? Whereas previously you could only ask those questions to a qualitative sample. The difference being, a qualitative sample, if you've got, 6 focus groups, you might have 50 people maximum in those focus groups. With a quant study, you might have 1,000, even 2,000 people, where you can then use this AI technology to ask a number of qualitative questions. So it allows for, I guess, an expansion of the qualitative sample. I guess from a personal point of view and from a professional point of view, as somebody that is coming back into doing a lot more face-to-face research post-COVID and the lockdown period, we're now starting to re-engage with people in the physical world again. And I recently conducted a study, an ethnographic study, on the experience of disconnection amongst people that belong to a particular institution. And I physically got together with people and got them to physically show and tell me their worlds and their practices and their rituals. And I focused on, what were the lived experiences that made them feel disconnected versus connected. And the thing that happened in doing that, actually engaging with them in their environment, is that, first of all, I'm able to see everything, right? So more than 360 degrees, I see spherically around me everything in this person's environment. So I'm able to observe and respond to things that I wouldn't be able to see or experience just within this rectangular screen. So when we're doing a Zoom immersion, we are limited to the rectangular screen. The other thing is that we're also limited to the coverage that the that the respondent provides us in terms of showing us their world. Whereas when I'm in their world, I'm able to move around and I'm able to frame it myself through my own observational frame or observational lens. There's also the physical activity of walking, talking, doing, showing and telling, all sorts of different activities. And when this happens, all sorts of things crop up. All sorts of interactions will serendipitously crop up and provide unexpected insight and further inquiry, what I call reflexive observational inquiry, where the questions will arise from being immersed in the context with the participant. And this just is so much more limited within, say, a platform like a video call, like a Zoom conversation. It's much less possible. So I would, without hesitation, say that in terms of the level of depth, physically getting together with people face to face, being in their world, being able to connect with them at a human to human level, being able to observe beyond 360 degrees, being able to do that observational reflexive inquiry, you are able to achieve so much more depth when you're physically with them. But that's not to say that it's the only way we should be conducting research. We should be conducting hybrid research because we get enormous benefit from getting the coverage, the access that technology provides us. What I am worried about is that we become so enamored with the technology that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, that we go, well, you know what? We actually don't need to conduct face-to-face research anymore. We don't actually need to make the effort of going and meeting people in their everyday lives, in their everyday context. And to me, the solution is simple, that we do hybrid research, we add on and we integrate. And therefore, what we're able to do is close the gap between depth and breadth.
Let's replicate Alfred Kinsey's thing for a second, right? Let's say we want to do a study on collect people's sexual history, qual and quant, whatever, and we're going to do it with 10,000 people in Australia, right? Okay, how do we do it? So, okay, recruit the people, get them online, whatever. And what would appear on the screen would be Nick or me or someone else, or whoever, right? Would be you, right? And you would be asking the questions through a sort of an animation. We'd write the questions, you'd be asking the questions, but they wouldn't be, they're very open, like we would do with a qual researcher, they're very open-ended questions, right? They're not directive. And then you're programmed, the AI picks up things to probe on. So you'll come up, oh, I've noticed you said something about X, Y, Z. So it's you talking. I'm Nick, right? It's me. It's my avatar. It's my virtual research self. It's my virtual research self right here. I'd love to talk to you in person, but I can't. This is my virtual research self, and I'm going to ask you certain probes, etc. And you might have a short probe conversation with that person about certain things or whatever. And now what I'm saying is that and they will also be speaking back to the screen. The data is collected in transcription in text format, right? But the interaction, I'm laughing because you just told me this morning you have to cancel an online supermarket interview because the respondent couldn't unmute herself. And here I am saying that respondents are going to be talking to an avatar on a screen and not so much in the future now. Okay, so obviously there's a big technological hurdle there for everyone, but to get to that point. But what I'm saying is that at some point the researcher will have an AI version of themselves that kind of conducts a form of qualitative research and quant, because you can ask some other quant questions as well, right? A form of qual and quant research with thousands of people, obviously, in a survey type environment. And what we do is we write the questions, we kind of analyze it, whatever. But the fielding of it becomes, there's no qual or quant, it is us interviewing 10,000 people through virtual self.
I don't know whether I feel humbled or frightened or excited by this progress. It makes rational sense to be able to have an AI avatar of yourself that can be rolled out at quantitative proportions to conduct qualitative survey where it can then be further crunched by some sort of AI analytical assistant.
Those platforms already exist. Those crunching platforms, they already exist.
Will people actually feel like they'll give us more or less, or will it depend on the? Will some people go, oh well, it's good to know that it's not a real person. I can share with them more stuff, or it's not a real person, so I'm not going to tell them anything true. It's difficult to understand how people will react in terms of the data that they provide through this mechanism. The first thing that I was ever taught as a qualitative researcher was the importance of establishing a trust and rapport, whether it was a focus group, an in-depth interview, or an
100%.
The first thing that you have to do is establish a trust and a rapport, okay, which means that you get on the same level as the person, you reassure them about any concerns, you give them some basic frameworks in terms of how they might answer the questions in terms of open-ended, be descriptive, there's no right or wrong answers, etc., etc. To this day, you know, I've got my blurb that I say at the beginning of all of my qualitative sessions. And I was told that that was absolutely important, absolutely critical, that human element of trust and rapport was vital. With this new technology, do we lose that?
Yeah, maybe, probably to an extent, but let me backtrack for a second, because I think we're all coming from the point of view of a benchmark that face-to-face interviewing is perfect. We get everything, they're totally honest. Okay, now I'll give you an example. I come from, I've been doing this a long time, and when I was much younger, we used to do face-to-face. We used to have printed questionnaires, and field workers would go out door to door and do these surveys. Right now, I once looked at the responses to those surveys, and mind you, this is face-to-face at kitchen tables, face-to-face with an interviewer, and the responses were pretty much in 5% of the data. A lot of the responses were bogus responses, and this is with an interviewer sitting right there, right? So to think that all interviews are going to tell us the truth, they don't. There is a percentage of information. It could be 5, it could be 10%. I don't know. That is kind of bogus, and you can use bits of it, but not other bits of it. Same with qual, right? Probably 1 in 10 interviews, you can use some of it, not all of it. Same thing, right? So it's that sort of situation. So number one, we're coming from a flawed place anyway. So we're coming from 90%. We're not coming from 100%. We're coming from 90%. So how much more are we losing, to your point, by moving to this other system, right? And the other thing is that I remember once, sorry, I know this sounds tangential, but once someone explained to me the difference between behavioral therapy and psychoanalytic therapy in psychology, right? And I said, psychoanalytic therapy is like digging a massive, massive hole, right, in order to find one little bone, right? Whereas behavioral therapy basically just, I think, you go for the bone, you fix the bone, whatever, right? So it's kind of more therapy. So, and sometimes qualitative research can be a bit like that if we're not careful. We can start to dig these huge contextual holes that we feel are important, but they might be too big. They might be too broad-reaching. We could have afforded to go in more, be more surgical, more incisive, more to the point. You know what I mean? We didn't need the amount of rapport and trust and all that kind of stuff for. Not all projects require context. Not all projects require for you to look at my house or my car or the way I shop. Some projects, some information is asking, and a lot of information is asking a respondent to recount things that they've done. You know what I mean? Which doesn't require any backgrounding, really, to be honest. So I think it's that situation, Nick. It's a situation where, look, if you need to establish a very good context and understanding, then you got to get your camera out, go to homes, like we've been doing, Nick. We've just done a project we went to supermarkets with people, right? Because we wanted to be there with them, even though it was a very narrow topic inside the supermarket. We wanted to be there with them, right? And then we'll also do online interviews with people, but we've got that grounding of being there with them. And you and I both felt that was really important, that we needed to be there with them for a lot of the interviews, right? So you're right, in a way that doesn't go away. That doesn't go away. So it's a hybrid.
And to that point, Rigas, with this project that we've just worked on, where we insisted on also being there at the shop, as well as doing the online component. So it's a hybrid piece of research. I would also say that going there and being with them offers a confirmatory component, right? So we're seeing it, we're being there with them at a researcher level, we're making certain determinations because there's a level of question mark around doing it one way or the other way. When we do it both ways, we actually cover more of the question mark.
I think what you said initially, Nick, was the confirmatory aspect of it, which is very interesting because you're right. I mean, okay, you get all the quant data. I've done this so many. You get heaps of quant data and blah blah blah, and you present it, and you're confident in the numbers and what. But you're right, as intuitively, gut level, human gut level, I can't confirm any of it. Numbers, right? I can't confirm these numbers of people who drink this product. I can't confirm it anecdotally myself. I didn't speak to them. I didn't see it. I blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? So I just have to rely on the numbers. And so what you're saying is that with humans, there is a confirmatory element that we're in the supermarket with them. After 5 interviews each, it becomes pretty apparent what the hell's going on, right? And there is a kind of an intuitive, experiential confirmation at that point of reality.